Why avoidants can't detach from superempaths. There's a strange, almost magnetic tension that forms between an avoidant and a superempath, and it's not accidental. On the surface, the avoidant appears distant, self-contained, even emotionally unavailable. They pride themselves on independence. They convince themselves they don't need anyone. But beneath that protective armor is a nervous system wired by fear of engulfment and fear of abandonment at the same time. And then they meet the superempath. The superempath is not just caring. They are emotionally perceptive, deeply intuitive, and unusually resilient. They don't chase in a chaotic way. They observe. They feel. They give space, yet they understand what isn't being said. This combination quietly unsettles the avoidant, because for perhaps the first time, someone sees them without trying to control them. Someone senses the walls without demanding they fall immediately. That creates a bond that feels safe and dangerous all at once. Avoidants can detach from people who are overly dependent. They can detach from drama. They can detach from partners who demand constant reassurance. But the superempath is different. The superempath doesn't beg. They don't cling in panic. They often love calmly and steadily. And that steady presence regulates the avoidant's chaos in a way the avoidant doesn't consciously understand. When an avoidant pulls away, most partners react with pursuit. The superempath, however, often pauses. They reflect. They may withdraw their energy rather than escalate. And that shift changes the power dynamic. Suddenly, the avoidant feels something unfamiliar. The possibility of real loss. Not loud loss, not dramatic loss, but quiet, dignified disappearance. That is what lingers in the avoidant's mind long after the relationship ends. Another reason avoidants struggle to detach from superempaths is because superempaths activate growth. Avoidants are used to shallow emotional exchanges where they can remain hidden. With a superempath, hiding becomes harder. The empath mirrors their contradictions gently. They sense when the avoidant is overwhelmed, when they are triggered, when they are afraid. And instead of attacking, they respond with patience. That patience creates cognitive dissonance. The avoidant expects rejection if they reveal vulnerability. But the superempath doesn't reject. They hold space. That rewires something small but powerful inside the avoidant. Even if they run, even if they end things, their nervous system remembers what it felt like to be understood without pressure. And that memory is difficult to erase. There is also the ego factor. Avoidants often detach to maintain control. Distance gives them power. It protects them from feeling dependent. But the superempath doesn't play power games. When they finally detach, it is not to manipulate. It is to protect their own emotional health. And when that happens, the avoidant feels the shift immediately. The supply of emotional safety, quiet validation, and intuitive understanding disappears. The avoidant may tell themselves they are relieved. They may distract themselves. But internally, something feels unfinished. Because with the superempath, the connection wasn't built on chaos. It was built on depth. And depth leaves a residue. Superempaths also tend to see the wounded child inside the avoidant. Not in a savior way, but in an aware way. They understand that the avoidance isn't cruelty, it's protection. That kind of understanding creates emotional intimacy without forcing vulnerability. And that intimacy becomes addictive for someone who has spent years suppressing their own needs. The avoidant may sabotage the relationship when it gets too real. They may create distance when they feel themselves softening. But after the separation, they replay moments of calm conversations, moments where they felt accepted without being trapped. That contrast between peace and their usual emotional isolation becomes haunting. Finally, avoidants struggle to detach because superempaths often trigger transformation. When a superempath stops overgiving and starts setting boundaries, the avoidant loses the comfort of emotional predictability. They realize that the empath's love was a choice, not a guarantee. And that realization challenges their belief that people always leave or demand too much. In some cases, the avoidant begins to question their own patterns for the first time, not because they were forced, but because they experienced something different. something stable, something mature. Even if they don't reach out, even if pride keeps them silent, the imprint remains. So the paradox is this. Avoidants appear detached, but they are deeply impacted by those who connect without chasing. The super empath doesn't overwhelm. They don't control. They don't collapse into neediness. They offer presence. And when that presence is gone, the avoidant feels the absence more than they expected. Detachment is easier when there was no real emotional depth. But when someone touched the parts you keep hidden, detachment becomes complicated. Because you're not just letting go of a person. You're letting go of the one place you felt understood without losing your freedom. And for an avoidant, that kind of connection is rare. That's why they struggle to truly detach.